Good morning, everybody. This is Haresh Malkani. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for CESMII. I would like to welcome you back to our webinars that are going to talk about the request for proposal that just came out recently around the Smart Manufacturing Innovation Projects. We had our first overview session last week. I'm hoping that many of you were able to attend that session. There is a recording available on the website if you haven't had a chance to look at it. And there's also a Q&A that is also posted from the questions that we received during the first webinar. So that's just for your information. What we will do today is to spend a little more time, a little bit more detail around what the innovation platform is, what the specific RFP is, and what we are expecting in that RFP. In the previous webinar, we went through some overview on each of these subjects. Today, we'll be taking a slightly deeper dive and actually helping you understand a little bit better on how to apply for these projects as well. So I'll spend just a few minutes to review what the SM Innovation Project is, and then we'll go into the deeper conversation. So Jonathan, if you don't mind advancing to the next slide, please. Oh, by the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A button on your Zoom window, and we will collect them and we will answer them towards the end. So this is a fairly exciting time for us at CESMII. We launched the request for proposal for something called the SM Innovation Project. The idea behind this project is that we want to have a very diverse team come together and demonstrate value in a short period of time through these projects. So these projects are targeted for 3 to 6 months time frame in terms of the duration. We have CESMII funding available as a match to your efforts. So 50-50, for example, if you have a project that's going to be made up of elements that will require, say, about 200K of effort, we would come in with 50% of that. So there's a 50-50 match there. And the project can be anywhere from 50K to 200K in total. And the idea behind this project is that we have a diverse team that's made up of, say, a systems integrator, manufacturer, a software application vendor, somebody from the academia or labs perhaps, or a machine builder, come together, and the manufacturer identifies a problem, a use case. That's the first step. So it might be a particular asset that they are concerned about, a particular process that's based on that asset perhaps, and a specific problem that needs to be solved on that process. Then the team then comes together and it creates a solution based on the components that are provided by the team members. And then during the process of the project, they also develop what we're calling SM profiles. So these are information models. They're structured information models that become part of the solution. And then on top of it, the team also develop any application or predictive models that go along with the solution. And so the generation of these two components is also part of this project. So you're going to solve a manufacturing use case, you're going to generate an SM profile, and you also provide some sort of an application to go along with it. Having said that, once the project is finished, we intend to publish these profiles and models as part of our CESMII SM Marketplace. So that's in a nutshell what these projects are about. If you can advance to the next slide, Jonathan. Now, what we've done is we've identified 3 major buckets of focus areas for these projects. So if you have something that addresses energy consumption or energy productivity, that's one bucket. The second bucket is around precision, productivity, and performance. So, throughput or quality, efficiency, all of those kind of fall into that bucket. And the third bucket is around asset monitoring or process monitoring, predictive maintenance, those types of things. And in each of these buckets, what we are asking you to do is have that use case targeted for that particular bucket and make sure that you are using our CESMII Innovation Platform. You're creating profiles for that piece of equipment or for that process, and you're providing a solution that has an application that helps you solve that problem, right? So those are the key components of this. Advance to the next slide, please. So the benefit for the project team here is that you're solving a manufacturing challenge, right? Using smart manufacturing technologies. You get free access to the platform that CESMII provides, and free access to the resources on cloud computing resources on Azure. And of course, we have the funding match up to 100K for your project. So that's what you get as a project team. And in return, CESMII and its members gets access to a library of these profiles and applications that are generated through these projects. And these are all reusable technologies that can actually help create other solutions or solutions for other team members within the network that have similar processes or assets, right? Through our SM profiles, we are also creating a way to reduce the cost and complexity of these implementations significantly. Our target is almost 50% in terms of a metric. And then finally, we have a way to demonstrate the CESMII platform in an actual manufacturing use case. So those are some of the benefits that we get as an institute. So with that, what we'll do now is to go into a little bit of more detail around three specific topics. The first one being the SM Innovation Platform. And Jonathan, if you can maybe introduce yourself when you begin, we'll take care of that item on innovation platforms, and then we will move on to the other two topics soon after that. All yours, Jonathan.
Thanks, Harish. So this is a picture we put together that kind of describes our implementation of these specifications that we're looking to have made standard. And it's worth a minute kind of on each layer, but I really want to draw your attention to the blue boxes that join each layer. So at the bottom, regardless of what your project is, it should be based against a manufacturing operation. We're trying to solve problems in manufacturing to make manufacturing smarter or cleaner. So we need to start with the operation. We need to ingest data from that operation. If you're going to perform any analysis, you're going to need to get the data out. We don't want just raw, unstructured data, although the data source may be unstructured or minimally structured. We want to enforce some structure on that so that it's contextualized and usable. And then we want to operate against that data to return some kind of value. And the glue between those kinds of steps of the process that we're going to go into in much more detail is what we call the smart manufacturing profile. And the profile has multiple parts. That's why it's in multiple places. But at its most basic level, the profile is a generic description of, we'll say asset, but we'll define asset to mean equipment, process, material, whatever it is that you're working against as a data source in a structured fashion. This profile idea is not novel. We think that working together, we can draw some ideas into a common specification. But the concept shouldn't be too alien as we go into it. And it works at these three layers. At the edge, where we'll define edge as the boundary between the operational network and the information network, or OTIT. At the core, to enforce the structure and expose that structure to the app, which will consume that data, compute against it, and contribute some kind of value. So profiles really are the seed of this kind of healthy manufacturing information ecosystem we're trying to create. One of the key proponents, key partners in this concept with us is the Opc Foundation. SM profiles are an extension of their part 4. So the OPC UA specification is large. Some parts have a lot of pickup, and other parts are kind of earlier in their journey. But the information model part 4 of the OPC UA spec, is very mature. And so that's where we're working with them on taking this idea of an information model that can be expressed once and then reused in multiple places. And if this seems a little too abstract, I wanted to try today an example. And this is an example we often use in math, although I'm no mathematician. Let's say that the application or the problem that you were trying to solve was predicting the distance a ball could be thrown. Now, obviously, that's probably not an actual application of this project. But if you think generically, we have some kind of manufacturing process, and that process has a goal, and we want to optimize output towards that goal. So the ball throwing problem is a decent one to start with. And if we begin kind of breaking down this problem, we start to look at the assets or objects or pieces of the puzzle. So we have the thrower of the ball, and there is some data from that asset. How fast did they throw it? At what angle did they throw it? Was there any spin to the ball as they released it? We have the ball itself. It has size, it has weight or mass, and it's got some kind of material wrapped around it that may impact how it flies. And then we've got the atmosphere in which we are throwing this ball. So wind direction, humidity, even temperature can impact how the ball travels. These things are a part 1 profile. Part 1 profile is just the description of the data, the metadata, if you will, the properties of each participant in this process that we're trying to optimize. This is context. This is the beginning of context. But we also need to know the relationships between these assets or these different parts in the process. So we'll capture those relationships as well. And since there's multiple relationships, we need to capture them in a graph. And then finally, once we have this structure, we have the relationships, we have to build the actual calculator. So we'll call this the app. The app is the thing that consumes the data, runs it through a calculation, and produces a result. So if we kind of label the parts of this process, we need to connect to the data sources in order to populate the profile, or what we would call an instance of the profile. We need context. We need to know the relationships in the data. We need to consume that structured data. We need to compute against it so that we can contribute. And then there's one more step that we need to do in a really mature project. And that is to make some decision based on the analysis. So we've made a prediction. We've decided the prediction has fallen short of our goal. So we're going to run what we might call a workflow as a result of that app's calculation to impose a change in control in the operation. So this is the full loop. Not every project's going to go through the full loop, and we'll call out kind of what the minimum parts are for a successful project proposal. But what I want to highlight is that there are parts that are not in here. The actual data is not in the profile. The profile is an abstract description of what to expect from the data, but the profile is not the data itself. The profile is also not the instance. So in the abstract, I can describe a human ball thrower, I can describe a ball, but the actual equipment instance or process instance, that belongs to the manufacturer. That is not part of the profile. The calculation that you come up with, or the logic or the code, whatever you build so that after you consume the data, you can transform it into value, that's your app. We are not expecting you to turn that over for free. In fact, that is the point of the marketplace, is to provide you with a venue where you can list your app, and you can monetize it. You can sell it. You can make it available to other people who have a human and a ball and an atmosphere. And then the workflow you can think of as an extension to the app. What do you want to do with the results of this analysis? That's also your IP. That's also what you can opt to make available for a cost. The parts that we want you to build are the profile, which get put in the marketplace, the app, which gets put in the marketplace, and optionally, the workflow that makes decisions, multiple decisions as a result of the app to turn it into a set of value, not just a result. So if we try to de-abstract here and think about a piece of equipment in manufacturing, if the asset that you're going to work against is a hydraulic press, that press has a ton of data made up of multiple data sources. The actual data values are not the profile, but how you choose to structure that data or break it down into multiple structures could be multiple profiles. Each of those could potentially be monetized independently. Each of those can be listed independently, or there could be one large profile for everything. That's not generally the pattern that we'd recommend. But if you think about the problem space of the project that you're trying to put together, that first most important prerequisite is the profile, the description of the set of data that will be useful for some kind of value creation against it, some kind of information. So if we go back to our original diagram here, you will be building a part one profile. Like we talked about, there are other parts to the profile that CESMII and its members are working on for Wave 4.x projects. This project that we're talking about here, you only need to focus on part one of the profile, what we would call the class definition or that generic object model. You'd need to focus on the app. What are you going to do with the data? And optionally, a workflow that acts against the result of your app to orchestrate multiple steps that a manufacturer might take as a result of your prediction or your value creation. Okay. These things are deliberately intended to be standards-based. So we're going to steer you towards a couple options for tools so that this output can be compliant with those standards. The default path that most projects should take is to leverage some software that is going to be provided for you for free from a CESMII member called ThinkIQ. And one of the important reasons that that's the default path is that ThinkIQ encompasses multiple parts of this life cycle or process that we want to see patterned out. They provide tools for connecting to the data. They provide tools for contextualizing the data, and they provide an API that we worked on together as an open API to consume the data. And they have a really nice tool for actually building your information model, for building your part one profile or your class definition. So this is the default pattern. This is what we expect most projects will take. We're all in this together and we're evolving this kind of common path. But because these things are open standards, if you find that there are some constraints or this default set of tooling lacks maturity in an area that you need to exercise for your project, an alternate path also made available for free to projects from another member beyond is to use their OPC UA modeling tool. The modeling tool will allow you to produce the part one profile, the class definition, but the other parts of the process are up to you. And there are other members who sit on either side of this equation. Some are new to CESMII, so they're not quite slipstreamed into this process, but we can absolutely broker those connections. But I put those arrows in gray because if you don't use the default path, these are problems you'll need to come up with solutions for in order to meet this pattern. And then coming out the other side, that control side, if your project proposes to go that far, and we realize that for $200,000 or less, not every project is going to get to closed loop control. But if that's kind of within your ambitions for the project, another member, Savagent, has provided their workflow engine, again, for free for the lifetime of your project, to actually perform the necessary orchestration steps for control, and that can be consumed regardless of which path you take. I'll call back just before I give up the floor, one slide, just to highlight a question that might be coming up. What if your pattern needs to run closer to the edge? You have ambitions to do the full loop from consuming the data to computing to control, and you don't want to make a round trip through multiple software stacks. We absolutely endorse that pattern. I think the tools that we are beginning to explore and work with at that level that embrace the standards that we want to see become commonplace in this industry, I think they're maybe, I wouldn't say less mature, but they're kind of earlier in their exploration. So we'd like to talk with you if you're looking for a closed loop pattern that kind of stays near the bottom of the stack. It shouldn't rule out your project, but it will require kind of more conversation and exploration to decide how you intend to tackle that in an open specification standards-based fashion. Like I said, kind of at the beginning, these patterns exist. If we call back to the previous webinar, we've explored why they continue to be constraints, and it's largely because of proprietary solutions, because of vendor lock-in. So like I said, the patterns aren't new. What we're really trying to drive home is that we need to explore these patterns in a standards-based way with open specifications without trying to lock people into a vendor ecosystem. And then a secondary goal of the project is if you hit challenges, can we leverage the members, and can we together as an industry move those standards forward to meet these needs? All right, Miguel, I think you're up next.
Yeah, this is just before you get on, Miguel, just let me take care of a couple of questions that have come up on the Q&A and the chat, if you don't mind. One is a fairly easy one. Is the slide deck going to be available? The answer is yes. After we are done with the webinar, there'll be a recording that will be available as well. So watch out for that one. Another question was around what's the difference between the project team and the CESMII members. I think I may have misspoken there, but what I meant is that the project team is the immediate team that's working on the project itself, right? Whereas the CESMII members that I was referring to is the broader membership. So if there's another member that wants to utilize the components that you created from that, that particular project, they should be able to use that for pre-production purposes, for example, right? That's the idea. And the third one, maybe Jonathan, you can chime in here, but if the CESMII Innovation Project team builds the profiles and applications for a specific pain point that a manufacturer has, and then we upload that to the marketplace, how does the manufacturer avail of this thereafter? So, Jonathan, do you want to answer that one?
I think we could break this question down a couple of ways. So who makes money on it when it's sold? If the manufacturer wants to get back some of their investment by monetizing the app they've had built, that's up to the project team. It's not CESMII's IP, it's the project team's IP. So you can decide who makes money off of it. We'd also, I think, call for manufacturers to think a little more altruistically. If their supply chain can standardize, their supply chain is going to get better. If a manufacturer truly just wants to solve a problem for themselves and not share, remembering that the data is not part of the profile, the logic is not part of public domain. If after all that they want to keep it to themselves, we will support private transactions where both a profile and an app can be made available only to certain users. And again, the folks with the IP rights get to make that decision.
Excellent. Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next topic here, which is a little more detail around the RFP itself. And we have Miguel Corcio with us. Miguel, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Haresh and Jonathan. Appreciate it. I'm trying to turn my camera on. There it goes. So first of all, yeah, thank you for joining us today. I'm assuming at this point you have a pretty good idea of what we're after in these type of RFPs in these innovation projects. I wanted to just capture here very briefly just a summary so you can have it available, specific to, Resh talks about the $200,000 limit on the projects, the 50% cost share, and the total amount of funding that is available for this round two of projects, and also the duration at more than 6 months. But one thing that to keep in mind as you prepare your teams and you decide to respond to this RFP is that you have until the end of December to submit your proposal. And then after that, we're going to go through, obviously, the evaluation. There'll be a selection process in place. We'll notify the selections by the end of January. And then we're going to get into the contracting phase, which is going to take us pretty much at the beginning of March or so. Okay, so keep those dates in mind because those are really critical for us. Those are the targets that we have at this point. And the other critical information is the resources. As you prepare your proposals, keep going back into our website and checking for any updates. We are going to be posting all the questions and answers related to this RFP. Obviously, there will be questions through December, and we'll be posting those. And some of those are probably going to be very impacting what you're doing and provide some additional guidelines on the type of responses that you need to provide on the RFP itself. So keep those in mind. A lot of information on the website related to this type of projects, helpful information that will guide you through the process and also give you, a better direction on how to respond more accurately to the RFP. Also, there's only 2 documents that we are expecting as a submission for this RFP response. The proposal itself, which I'm going to get into in a couple of minutes. We'll go through the template. And then there's the project one-pager, which is the PowerPoint, one slide about the project, and we are providing that template as well. So, if you follow those instructions, once you complete your proposal, creating the one-pager is very simple because it's really just a summary of what you have given us in the proposal itself. So this is really good information to keep handy as you continue working with your team and putting together, the proposal response. Next slide, please. A couple of things to keep in mind as well as you develop your response. We wanted to capture, and we covered this in the previous webinar, but I wanted to just go through it really quickly again, just to make sure that, this is the essence of how we prepare for the evaluation and the selection. And I'm going to go into the criteria as well, but keep these questions in mind. The problem statement, very critical, okay? It has to be articulated in a way that, it's simple and at the same time, it comprises exactly what you're trying to accomplish. So what is the problem, okay, that you're trying to solve? That's really critical, and make it clear, okay? The objectives, what are you trying to solve? What would be the outcome? The deliverables at the end of the project. I have seen in the past on submissions that the deliverables are not clear. So make sure that your deliverables are clear. List them, bullet points. This is what you're going to get at the end of the project. This is what we're shooting for. Be very specific and clear on those outcomes and the objectives. Your approach, how are you going to solve these problems? The methodologies that you're going to use, that's really important as well. And it has to be captured in the submission and the response to this RFP. Because that will tell us exactly whether, the process that you're going to follow in achieving the results that you're expecting at the end of the project. And the benefits. And when we talk about the benefits, which is, what are the benefits? Not only for the teams, the question before was about the teams and the CESMII members. That's exactly what we're addressing here. What is the impact and the benefits to the team itself? And then to the CESMII as a whole, for the rest of their members. So those 2 things should be clear. For example, if you're working on a specific piece of equipment and you develop the profiles and you do everything that Jonathan was talking about, and then you said, this is what we're going to get for this specific application. But then that's the benefit to that team. Then you can translate that into saying, well, now, if I take a holistic approach, who else is going to benefit from that? Within the CESMII membership group, are we going to expand this to other, maybe other companies, other industries, or is it going to be specifically for one very narrow, industry? So those are the things that we're looking for. We need to know what the differences are and the impact that this is going to have as a whole. Deliverables, make sure that, when you're developing your proposal, you talk about the tasks and the milestones, and they got to be smart, meaning that they have to be specific. Okay. We have to be able to measure that milestone at the end. It has to be achievable also. We got to put something that we can measure at the end. It has to be realistic and time bound. So all of that has to be captured within 6 months. And this is the place where we want you to put that, to make sure that those tasks, milestones are described in a way that they're smart, that anybody can make sense out of them and have a really good idea on the direction, what's being accomplished, what's going to be done during the work. And at the end, can we measure the result? And then the budget, in this particular case, we are not asking for a very elaborate budget. We're not asking for a 335 form, for example. What we want is a very concise budget, which will capture the labor that you're planning and spending there, the materials, the software, the travel, equipment, if there's equipment available or that you need to use or purchase, all of that has to be captured there, but not more than that. So there's not a lot of work to be done other than making sure that you capture the essence of the budget for the project. And then Haresh mentioned at the beginning that one of the goals of this type of proposals or projects is to make sure that we put together the right team to solve those specific problems that will help us in the industry. And so that making sure that the team members and their roles are specific is important for us. Who's doing what, okay? We talk about the deliverables and the tasks and milestones. Who's doing what in what specific task? That's important. You don't have to be very, very elaborate in describing specific things, but you can say, for example, we are going to develop, let's take a very general approach, a profile. In the profile, I'm going to have this person A, B, and C working on it for 3 months or something like that. Okay, so that's what we're looking for. We want to tie the milestones and the tasks and the deliverables to the team members so we can see who's working on what. Okay, so that's critical. So keep that in mind as you start developing your responses. Next, please. So now you might ask, oh, how are you going to select the projects? And this is a good question, and this is exactly what we want you to keep in mind when you're developing your submission, because we want to be very transparent. This is what we use to evaluate the proposals. Okay, we use 3 areas. One is what we call the general criteria, and the technical evaluation, and then the selection of the portfolio. So let me go through it a little bit more in detail. For example, on the general criteria, what are we looking for? Well, we want to see what the business impact is, the percentage improvement, and we talked about productivity and energy and all of that, and maybe downtime that we're targeting as well. What is the target in terms of percentage? Can we measure that? Now, I gotta keep in mind also, as you developed the response, that these are only 6-month projects. So we understand in some cases it's going to be kind of difficult to have a specific target in mind and be able to measure that. But we need to look into that as well. So we're looking for an idea. If you feel that, by doing this project and developing this application and this profile and doing this, I will, target a 10% improvement, let's say, to energy reduction. And you said, but I'm not going to have enough time in the 6 months to prove that. Well, mention that in your proposal, because that's what we need. If you feel like, this is going to be too short, and the validation of the improvement is going to take a little bit longer. So we need to know that as well, because that's part of what we try to do here when we're evaluating the proposals. The technical significance, we want to make sure that you tied these projects to the overall CESMII benefits. Yeah, we want to make sure that we have also tying the results of these proposals, these projects, into our technical roadmap. That's why we're also giving you access and making sure that you understand what our technical roadmap is. And it's on the website. You can see where we're going, the priorities for the Institute. All of that has to make sense and tie together. And the project execution as well. We talk about the deliverables. Are the deliverables well articulated and defined? So that's the general criteria, okay? And then we get into the more specific. This is the technical evaluation. And in here, we're looking at exactly, how are you addressing the different technical areas that Harish was mentioning before, those 3 areas. Which ones are you targeting? Are you targeting 1, 2, or 3? And how are they related if you're targeting the 3 of them with the same project? Or are you just using one? For example, you might say, I have an issue here with downtime, unpredicted downtime, and I want to address that through this. Perfect. It's not, you don't have to answer the 3 or address the 3 areas of interest, but you need to be clear on what you're trying to accomplish and which ones you're addressing, because that tells us, yeah, you are really responding to the areas of interest reflected on the RFP. Your approach, we talk about, that the problem has to be clear and articulated in a way that we can understand it and that we can make sense out of it. So that's important as well. And the technical management capabilities, we talk about the team. This is critical. Do you have the right team? Do you have the right experts in your team? If you're going to build profiles, do you have the right people to help you with that? Have you engaged, a system integrator? Or if you're doing something else, do you have the representation from the industry? Those are the type of questions that you should answer yourself as you develop the responses. And then at the end, we look at what we call the portfolio selection. And this is really at a high level, because we might end up with 10 wonderful, fantastic projects, but we still have to make a decision, okay? Obviously, we have limited funding, so we got to make sure that we pick the right proposals. And those proposals, if they say all of them follow this and they're all perfect, well, at the end, some of them will have a bigger impact than others. So we look at the selection, the portfolio. Do we have anything already? For example, if you're addressing a specific area, somebody is already addressing downtime and they're developing a specific profile for the same piece of equipment that you're proposing. Well, that's going to be an issue for us, because that would be a duplicate of effort. But if you're developing a profile and working in responding to the RFP in a way that in equipment that hasn't been mentioned before, we don't have it, then we might say, okay, yeah, this is exactly what we want. This is the opportunity that we see, and this is the gap that we need to close. So we're looking for that. We're closing the gaps that we have in the Institute when it comes to technology. Are we, bringing all these different tools and apps to continue expanding our marketplace in the Smart Manufacturing Innovation Platform? Are we covering with this specific solution, different industries? And can they be applied to different locations, different industries, different environments? So that's all critical for us. So you can see the selection is not a very simple thing, but we take all of that into consideration. So let me now walk you through the process itself and what you should expect in the next 3 months or so. Okay, so this is in summary what the RFP process follows. And we're in the development area where we are issuing. We have released the RFP. We have put together the areas of interest. We internally with the DOE, we have agreed that this is the RFP that we wanted to release, and we've done that. So now we're in the project review and selection. And this is where you prepare your proposals, okay? We evaluate the proposals. We come to a consensus internally. We work with the DOE as well to make sure that we're selecting the right portfolio projects for these specific innovation projects. So this area is what you will see in the next month and a half, 2 months or so, where we'll take your proposals, we'll put them through the internal evaluation, and then we'll make the selection based on the criteria that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. And then once we finish that selection, obviously we come to the contracting phase. And in the contracting phase, we go through what we call the negotiation first. So for example, let's say that your proposal is successful. We will notify you and say, okay, congratulations, your proposal has been selected. We will continue into the negotiation phase. What it means here is that maybe there were some elements in the proposal that were really good and that we liked and that made a lot of sense to close the gaps that we have in the technology in the institute. But there might be some issues that we need to clarify. It could be issues on the scope, or it could be the budget itself, okay? So that negotiation phase gives us an opportunity for finalizing the scope of the project and finalizing the budget with you. Okay, now there might be situations where you might not agree with us, or we might not be able to come to a consensus with you in terms of what the final scope and budget is. So that's what we'll call it a negotiation. So it could mean that, you might say, no, I don't want to continue with the project, or you might say, no, this is a very easy and we can adjust it, we can do that. So the negotiation part is very critical for us as well in this process. And once we get through the negotiations, we agreed, we clarified anything that needs to be clarified on the proposal, then we move to the contracting preparation of documents. And here is where we will engage with you in writing and helping you write the final. Well, actually, you have to write the final SOPO in the statement of project objectives, and then we will turn it into an official budget as well. There might be other documents that will be required, like cost share letters, of course, and maybe some supporting information that we need. All of that has to be captured in the contracting phase. Now, there are two things that you also will have to help us with if you get selected and you're successful with your proposal. One is the preparation of the documents for the approval of the DOE to continue with the project, okay? And the other one is, once that is clear, we will engage with UCLA in the actual writing of the contract to you. So the contract will be addressed, or will be coming from UCLA to the lead organization. But before we get to that, we have to get the green light from the DOE, which is basically making sure that the statement of project objectives is clear in the budget. Now, one thing that we've done to help in expediting that process, can you go back for a second, Jonathan, if you don't mind? One thing that we have done is the proposal itself that you're going to be preparing is going to be very close to the SOPO that we need at the end. So there's not going to be a lot of work once you write a good proposal, then turning that into an official statement of project objectives to move on to the contracting with UCLA is not going to be that difficult, because you have done most of the work already. It's clear, it's very well articulated. I mean, it has all the different elements that we're looking for. And then once you get the sub-recipient agreement from UCLA, obviously we'll get into the execution phase, which is starting with the kickoff meetings. Okay, Jonathan, if you don't mind, could you please move to the next slide? So now let's spend a few minutes in the actual template. And if you can open it for me, Jonathan, that would be fantastic, so we can go through it. So this template, what we've done is we spent some time trying to give you some examples in the template itself. And the idea was that, sometimes we said, okay, make it clear, make it smart, make sure you have good tasks, milestones. But the only way to make sure that the message is clear to you is to give you the example. So we're going to go through a couple of pages here, a couple of sections, just to give you a flavor of what you're going to see here if you haven't yet. So can you go to the second page?
Hey, Miguel, just a quick time check. You've got 1 more minute for this section.
Okay, yeah, we're almost done. So I just wanted to pick up a few points here. Keep going. Let me jump right into, that one is right here. So for example, you might say, okay, what do I include in the executive summary? Well, we have provided you here with a good example, that we came up with it internally. Harish put a lot of work into this. So it's clear, this is a very good executive summary. The same thing with the problem statement. If you read what's in green, you will say, oh, that's fantastic. It's clear. I know what they're trying to accomplish. I know what they mean. So those are just reference points for you as you're writing your proposal. Next section, really quick, Jonathan. I want to get into some of the milestones. Keep going. Right there. Yeah, so in here, you know, one big issue that we have found in the past is that it's been a little bit difficult for people to look at and capture deliverables and tasks that are smart. So we're giving you examples here. You know, you start with the task, you put a description of the task, you specify specifically what the deliverables will be on that task, and then you get into the subtasks. And again, you know, short descriptions, but very, very nice and clear. So that's what we're looking for, you know, the duration of those subtasks, the duration of the tasks. And then at the end, everything will follow, because once you do this part, you know, you capture all the milestones, obviously. In this particular case, you're gonna have only milestones. You will not have go, no go decision points, because there was only 6 months and they're all gonna be within budget period 4. So there are no issues there. And then at the end, you capture all the milestones in a table. You put your reference of all your people that will be working on the team in reference to these different tasks and subtasks. So I hope this gave you a quick overview of what we're looking for on the template, on the proposal itself. Obviously, you know, you're welcome to keep submitting questions around these topics, you know, as you're preparing your proposal. So I wish you the best. And back to you, Haresh.
Great, thank you, Miguel. I know there was a lot of information, so you know there's probably going to be some Q&A that we will have to address at a later point. But let's get quickly to a sort of a mini tutorial on what a cost share is. We talked about, you know, matching federal funds in the project, and I believe we have Howard who's going to go through some slides here. Howard, floor is yours.
Sure. First, I'm going to let Dale Turner do the initial slides here. So, Dale, you want to kick off? Or?
Yeah. You've noticed through a number of the meetings and share. So these now describe the type of cost shares, and then we have examples that will follow up. So cost share is in-kind contributions, which is a donation. You'll see that we align it with a financial value to the project. You will get copies of these slides that you'll be able to dig a little deeper into it. You'll see here how, you know, when we state 50-50, it's a dollar-to-dollar share. And then you'll be able to further go into the federal regulations that will have links so you could understand it from the federal level. So when we talk about projects and the cost share and what makes it up, we look at the personal cost that goes into it. We look at the raw materials and any of your laboratory supplies and ODCs to that level, and also the hardware or software associated with that project. And then facilities cost are the physical assets, could even be some of the machine time if you actually go down to that level, and then those administrative costs as well. Any of the equipment or rental that may be required to perform your project could be as part of the cost share. And then to close it is the value of service and other third-party in-kind. So when you have your subrecipients, you need to make sure you have them involved if they're receiving federal dollars for those. And then last is construction's not allowed. So any modifications, the building, things like that. If you go to the next slide, what you'll see here is the next slides will have grouping of examples of a staffing fringe association. You'll see here the facility, the square footage by acreage, and also the property insurance. And then you'll look at also materials and supplies and tools, how you can then look at those cost share numbers being part of the project, and then your equipment. So it's important to know that these cost share examples here are part of the project life cycle and capturing those. If you go to the next slide, please. And then if you look at the software, and we have a lot in this, is that your software cost? What is your software licensing? What is being provided as cost share on the project? And the life of that license across the project too. So here's some examples, and then also the curriculum and then a training as well for that software. And then also the market technology and road mapping report. So here it gives you the information as well on that, and then technology research. So you'll see here again, it's on our website. You'll have copies of these, but this is how we define those cost share. And then we have the education and consulting as well too, along with cash donations on projects. Next slide. So to bring it to closure and turn it over to Howard, here's a perfect example. The red is what the cost share is made up on a typical project example, and the green is what the federal share is for funding. So if you look at the ones we just went through, you're looking at the cost share and then the federal funding to be a 50-50. Howard, would you like to go on any other examples?
Sure. So here in this project, you see a partnership between an app vendor, OPC vendor, manufacturer, system integrator. System integrator gets about 100K, the federal dollars, the real green dollars. The app vendor, OPC vendor, manufacturer providing the cost share contribution for the project. So at the sum total against the 100K of federal share, they get 100K of cost share. So the app vendor is providing cost share by providing software licenses and training. The OPC or the Edge Connector vendor is providing software licenses for cost share. The manufacturer is providing some engineering labor. So this is labor that they're not getting paid to provide. They're contributing the engineering labor and access to a packaging line as well. And so the system integrator is getting the federal dollars to cover their labor rate. So if we go to the next slide, we start to show some of the accounting. So for the app vendor and the OPC Edge Connector vendor, they're contributing software licenses and training for software. So both software licenses and training count towards cost share. And the way that we value the cost share or this donation is so that the valuations are shown here, but you have to have evidence to show how they're valued. So the evidence can be as simple as if you have an online catalog to say, hey, I sell my software for this price. If you don't have a publicly available catalog, but you have an invoice, you've invoiced some customers, you can send us a redacted invoice where you redact the sensitive customer information, but show the valuation of the software and the training pieces. And that suffices as evidence for CESMII and DOE to value your software or your training contribution. So that's typically how we value software. For labor, so the manufacturer is providing labor, so providing 2 engineers at an hourly rate of $80 an hour, at roughly 117 hours. So that comes up with a raw payroll cost of just under $19,000. They're allowed to apply a fringe benefit rate. So this covers the benefits and the payroll taxes for the employee. And the last slide will talk about how that's calculated. You are allowed to bump up the labor rate with fringe benefit. And in addition to that, there's an indirect markup rate of 50% that's calculated at the end that you can bump it up further. So basically their $80 an hour raw, basic labor rate gets bumped up to $150 an hour through the application of fringe and overhead. So the next slide, we show how the same manufacturer calculates the cost share cost of providing access to their packaging line. So they have this packaging line that takes up so much square footage of their factory, and they can calculate either on an hourly or square footage basis or whatever makes sense. This example is hourly. They're showing the rent allocation per hour for that square foot of packaging line, utilities allocation, insurance, supplies and materials. So these are the categories Gail touched on earlier. So they come up with a raw cost of $10,000. And then again, they're allowed to apply the indirect markup rate. So with that, they're allowed to charge $15,000 or a fully burdened rate of $75 an hour for access to their packaging line. So the next slide. So the fringe rates, there's 3 options for doing fringe rates. So if you already have government contracts, you got a negotiated fringe rate, you can take that same rate, apply it to CESMII. That's great. You just provide us a copy of your fringe rate proposal with the government. If you don't have one, there's a link here to how to calculate this. There's some accounting examples to how to calculate your fringe rate. And some companies say, hey, I don't want to be bothered with all this accounting, and they don't charge a fringe rate, they just charge a straight labor rate. That's fine as well. So whatever these 3 options work for you is good. And then lastly, the next slide talks about how to calculate the overhead markup rate, the indirect rate. So again, if you already have a negotiated government contract with the federal government, could be any branch of the government, DOE, DOD, Defense Departments. That markup applies to CESMII. If not, again, you can calculate through this link to this document. If you don't want to do any calculation, you can charge a de minimis rate of 10%, but that has to be used consistently across all your government contracts across the board once you select to use the de minimis rate. And again, some members say, hey, I don't want to be bothered with all this accounting. I'm not going to charge any indirect rate. I'm just going to charge just my direct costs. I'm not going to do any markup. That's fine as well. So in a nutshell, there's some cost share examples, some bottoms up accounting. Again, the slide deck will be provided after the meeting and some helpful links here. And as always, we're available to answer any questions. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Haresh.
Thank you. Thank you, Howard. I know we are running a little bit over time. We got a late start, but we'd like to at least pick up on 2 questions, and then we'll answer the rest of them offline on the website. So there is one question around the cost share, Howard. It says the cost share examples talk about a longer project period, but these are all short 6-month periods. So we have to make sure that the cost share is applicable for that 6-month period, correct, on the project?
Correct. But it's the whole project team together contributes to the cost share. So however the project team wants to slice and dice it across the 6-month period, but yes, it's across the 6-month period. Right. But that's why we wanted to show all these categories. There's a lot of categories people don't realize that count as cost share.
Right. And I think as you are putting together your proposals, and if you have specific questions, we are happy to do some hand holding there and help you through the process. Not a problem.
Exactly.
And there was one other question that I'd like to address, and then we can call it a day here, which was around if you already have a project that's in a proof of concept stage right now, does that qualify as a project? So our intention is to have new ideas proposed to us. So the preference obviously is to have something something that's new. But if you're doing something that will eventually become reusable for the CESMII community, and that piece is the one that you're actually proposing, then that could potentially be considered. So I would say that if there's a strong benefit to the CESMII ecosystem as a result of that, then that would be okay. So we're running low on time here, so I want to respect your time. I would like to thank everybody who's participated today. The recording will be available to you, and we will post all of the questions and answers on the website within a day or 2 here. So please be on the lookout of that. And I want to thank the team that presented today as well. So with that, I will close off here, and we're looking forward to some really exciting proposals from all of you. Appreciate your time today, and have a great, safe rest of the week. Appreciate it.